Hi scholars, it's Miss Marnon. So today we're going to start our second lesson of Unit 5, Variables and Expressions. So our objective today is I can determine the value of an expression given a value for the missing variable. And we're going to talk about what variable means and what expression means today. So review, what is one property we talked about yesterday and what does it mean? So pause this video, go back and look at page 1 and what's one property that we talked about yesterday and what does it mean? So there's the three different properties you could have mentioned. You could have mentioned the associative. You could have mentioned the commutative or distributive properties. Associative is when we can group them all differently. That works for adding and multiplying. Commutative is when we switch the order around for adding and multiplying. And distributive is when we're multiplying something times a group, whether it's added or subtracting, or we could even divide that group out by the same number. So what does it mean when we use a letter like X in math class? So this is our preview question. Think about it for a moment and then pause the video and answer. Okay, so when we use a letter like X, it just stands for some mystery number usually. Either we have to figure out what the mystery number is, or we get to say what the mystery number is. So we have some vocabulary. So our first word is variable, and that's in our objective, so it's important that we know what it is. A variable is just a letter or a symbol in place of a number. So that's for like when we use X, Y, we've used K this year with our proportional relationship. Any letter that you use or symbol in place of a number. So for example, like maybe you make up a symbol that represents the number. We use a lot of like Greek letters too later in math as you guys go into algebra and geometry. But a variable is just a letter that stands for a number and we just don't know what it is yet. An expression is numbers, symbols, and we call them operators. So operators are adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. So it has such as adding and multiplying grouped together to represent a value. So it can be any combination of numbers, variables. You can add, subtract, multiply, divide. Sometimes you have like a exponent that will make an expression. It has no equal sign. So expressions are not equations. Equations have an equal sign, expressions do not. It's just a group of numbers and symbols and operators, and they have a value. So here we have label any variables and expressions below. So I'm going to color code it. So this whole thing and this little thing, those are expressions. So they're just grouped together. They have some kind of value, whether we know what it is or not. So that 3x plus 2 is one expression and 4y is another expression. Variables are just those letters. So let's just kind of highlight them. Let's do it in pink. So this x and this y, those are our variables. So the equal sign, this whole thing can't be an expression because it's got an equal sign. So these are two separate expressions. So let's look at our notes. So exercise 1, use the expression 3n plus 7 to answer the following questions. So part A, if n equals -2, should we first add 7 or multiply by 3? Why? So pause the video and think, what do you think we should do first with this n? Are we going to multiply it by the 3 or are we going to add 7 first? So if you remember your order of operations, which we're going to go over here in a minute, you should know that we're going to actually multiply by 3 first. And now it wants us to evaluate the expression when n equals -2. So this is what we're going to be doing a lot today, is we have some variable, so a letter, a mystery number, And we're going to be given a number to try for it. And we have to evaluate the expression. We have to see what value that expression has when the variable is that number. So we're going to use the expression 3n plus 7. And now where I have an n, I'm going to replace it with -2. So something that's going to help us, especially later when we get into algebra or like if we're squaring numbers, we want to just kind of put parentheses around that number. And also, I'm a lazy mathematician. I'm not going to write out multiplication between the 3 and now my -2. We can kind of just scooch them together with parentheses, and that still means times. So this is 3 times -2 plus 7. So as we said in part A, we're going to multiply first. So 3 times -2, -6. We still have the plus 7. -6 plus 7 is equal to 1. Now let's just quickly review, so we have this in our notes, what these order of operations are. So we have PEMDAS. I know some people say PEMDAS. Miss Marnon, when she went to school, she said PEMDAS, so that's what I say in class. So the P stands for parentheses, but it could be any kind of like grouping symbol. We talked about how sometimes you can have like the curvy parentheses, or sometimes you have brackets. E is exponents. So that's like if you have 3 squared, that little 2. M and D, that's multiplication and division. They happen simultaneously. So that means at the same time, you'd have to do them left to right. And so that's what a lot of things on Facebook, if you ever see people getting different answers for math problems, a lot of it's because they're not working multiplication and division left to right. They're the same step. Multiplication does not come before division. It's just how we remember it together is multiplication and division for PEMDAS. And I'm going to put this arrow here that just kind of means we're going to do them left to right. And the same for addition and subtraction. So we're going to do it. They happen the same step. So if you have subtraction and then adding and then subtracting, you're going to subtract, add, subtract. If you have adding, subtracting, subtracting, add, subtract, subtract. It's just going to be left to right. So now we reviewed order of operations. Let's look at exercise 2. So it says evaluate each of the following expressions using the given value for the variable. So we have 10 plus 5x for x equals 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to just take where we see this x, and I'm going to replace it with a 2. So 10 plus 5, and now instead of 2, this is 5 times x. We're just going to say 5 times 2. 5 times 2 is 10, so we have 10 plus 10, and that is 20. So pause the video and try part B. Okay, so we have 2n squared minus 7 for n equals -3. So I'm going to do 2. For my n, I'm going to put it in those parentheses. This is going to be -3, and the square is on the outside of the parentheses. If you're typing this on a calculator, it's really important that the negative sign is right next to the 3 in the parentheses. If it's on the outside, it's going to give you the wrong answer. And then we just have -7. So all I did is I replaced n with a -3. I like to put it in parentheses, keep it kind of together, especially when we have negatives. Sometimes it gets a little wonky in our calculator if you typed it in. So following order of operations, we need to do our exponents here first. So this is -3 squared. Squared just means multiply this number 2 times. So this is going to be 2. -3 times -3, or -3 squared, is going to be a +9 minus 7. So now following order of operations still, we have multiplication and subtraction. We multiply first. So 2 times 9 is 18 minus 1. We're going to get 17 as our answer. So why don't you pause this video and try part C. It looks a little tricky, but I think you can do it. Okay, so you should have tried part C. Everywhere I have a y, I'm going to replace with a 4. So we have 9 times y, but now we're going to have 9 times 4 minus 1 all over 4 plus 1. Now working with something like this, we can kind of think of the top and the bottom part of the fraction or division like they are in their own parentheses, which means we can actually work on the top and the bottom at the same time if we wanted to. I'm going to probably do it one step at a time, but if you do like the top and the bottom, whatever step you can separately, you can do that. I'm going to start with the top. 9 times 4 is 36. And we still have this minus 1, and I'm going to leave the 4 plus 1 for now. So now I'm down to subtraction and addition. I'm going to do these at the same step. 36 minus 1 is 35 over 4 plus 1 is 5. 35 divided by 5 is just 7. So these ones are a little weird, but we can still do them and we'll get used to seeing things that look like that. So now for the rest of class, we have some practice. You're going to do both of these questions. This first one's multiple choice, and then this one you're doing exactly what we did, substituting in the number for the letter or the variable. You have an exit ticket, and you're just going to do the same thing. So you're going to substitute in 3 where you see X. Make sure you're going to keep it in the parentheses and you follow this order of operations. When you're all done with your practice and your exit ticket, you can go onto Canvas and complete independent practice 25.